Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances, all close to Srila Prabhupada. Today we will discuss text 5 of the Nectar of Instruction. Krishneti yasya giritam manasandriyeta dikshati chet pranatibhischa bhajantamisham Shushurushya bhajan vigyam ananyamanya Nindadishunya hridam ipsita sangalabdya. One should mercifully honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, diksha, and is engaged in worshipping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So let's do a quick recap of the previous verses that we have studied. So verses 2 and 3, they talked about the importance of association with devotees. And the verse 4 talked about the 6 loving exchanges that specifically nourish devotee association. Dadati pratikranati guhyam akhti prachati. Then based on that, for 3 verses, Rupa Goswami has been talking about the importance of Vaishnava Sangha. Right? And you can imagine he has only 11 verses. And out of the 11 verses, in verses 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? 5 verses, he will essentially talk about Vaishnava Sangha. More than half the book is covered to Vaishnava Sangha. So one can imagine how important this is for one's spiritual life. So 2, 3 and 4, they laid the foundation for the importance of devotee association. Now, one may ask, are there further nuances to it? Or does everybody associate with everybody else in a similar mood? So this verse 5 will address that implicit question. So this is the analysis of Srila Prabhupada's purport. And Prabhupada essentially speaks about the 3 grades of devotees, Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttama. Because that's what the verse is speaking about. Prabhupada goes beyond that, and we will cover each one of them in further details. So summary of what is said. So essentially Rupa Goswami is advising the devotees to be intelligent enough to distinguish and deal with the 3 kinds of devotees, Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari and Uttamadhikari. Right? So this is the answer to that question. No, you don't deal with all the devotees in the same way, but you distinguish and deal with them based on their level of advancement. And based on the level of advancement, they're divided into Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttamadhikari. Right? So this would help to intelligently apply the 6-fold loving reciprocations that is mentioned. And now it seems logical, right? Because when you're doing, for instance, Kuyamakhyati Prachati, right? When you're sharing in confidence and receiving in confidence, the mood is different when you're doing it with a person who's a Kanishta. If you start or a neophyte devotee, right? And the mood is different when you're sharing with a spiritual master. So it's important to be able to make that discrimination. So Srila Rupa Goswami therefore advises that we should meet with the Vaishnavas in an appropriate way according to the relative status. Right. So now this is another important aspect. One is understanding the level at which the devotee that you're dealing with is at. The second is understanding at what level you are. And then based on that, the dealings are predicated. For instance, if you're in a corporate organization and you have a certain level in the hierarchy, and there are some people who are above you and there are some people who are below you and there are some people at the same level. So when you meet a person who is senior to you in the hierarchy, you will be more deferential. When you meet a person who is a peer, you'll be more collegial. And when you meet a person who's lower to you, you will be more authoritative. So, same way, but in the spiritual context now, that that understanding should be there. Where am I? Where is the other person? And based on that, the dealing is done. So not only should the devotee know his own position, he should not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher position. Sometimes devotees, when they meet with a higher devotee, they pretend to be a higher devotee. Right? They will also start talking in the same way. Firstly, it's artificial, it cannot be sustained. Secondly, it's harmful. So in the verse, it is said that the dealings start with mental respect for the Kanishtadhikari. And again, we'll expand on this. So mental is that there is no overt aspect of the interaction, right? You stay distant from them, but mentally offer respect. Now, when you're dealing with the Madhyamadhikari, then the mental is now with physical also, right? Which means physical means by offering obeisances, by words, showing respect to the devotee. So the mental now is mental and physical. And finally, when you're with an Uttamadhikari, it's mental, physical, and spiritual. So not only do you mentally offer respects, you also offer obeisances by words that you do, and then spiritually associating in the mood of inquiry and survey. Inquire about pastimes of Krishna, tattva, philosophy, etc. So this way the dealings go from mental to physical to spiritual as the grade of the devotee that you are interacting with also goes up. Now one may say that in corporate environment or in the material environment, this is everywhere, where people are conscious of their own status, the status of the other person, and then they're trying to determine the nature of the interaction. In spirituality, there is focus on being samadrishti. Right? So why carry this so-called material baggage into the spiritual conception? So Srila Prabhupada says, and the Shastra says, that intelligently apply. So the first aspect of that intelligence is in making an accurate understanding of the hierarchy, the relative hierarchy, which means accurately identifying the person is a Kanishta, Madhyama and Uttam, accurately identifying whether you're a Kanishta, Madhyama and Uttam, and then making that relative. And essentially, this is for our own protection. Right? So this is not really for any material benefits as it is in like the corporate world. So if you treat an Uttamadhikari like a Kanishtadhikari, there's an advanced devotee, you go there and then you say, hi, how are you doing? You put your arms around the person's shoulder and you interrupt the person. You say, I disagree with you. I think you need to go and read the Shastras again. Maybe the person will not take offense, but you are nevertheless committing offenses, harmful for your spiritual life. And one may say that why don't we then treat everybody like an Uttamadhikari? Right? And some people, not naturally but artificially, they do. With everybody they say, "Oh Prabhu, you are the highest devotee, you are pure devotee," etc. The problem with that approach is that if you start glorifying an Uttamadhikari and Kanishtadhikari like an Uttamadhikari, he will actually believe you, because they don't have enough discrimination either about their self or others. And sometimes it happens when new devotees come, then other devotees are encouraging them, and they say, "Oh Prabhu, you have definitely done a lot of service in your past life, you're very advanced." Person actually starts thinking that, yes, I'm very advanced. Then he starts acting like that. "I'm so advanced, I don't need to chant. I'm so advanced, I should go and talk to all the senior devotees. I'm so advanced that everybody should serve me." What happens then? Then their spiritual life suffers. Right? So whether you treat a Kanishta like an Uttam or an Uttam like a Kanishta, it is not good for you and it is not good for them. Right? So best is to associate with devotees who are at the same level as you are, or at a slightly higher level of advancement, on an extended level. Now, it doesn't mean we reject all other associations, because association is the basis of advancement. You should sit at the feet of your guru and listen, but not extended association. Srila Prabhupada has this policy that he would not keep uh, a disciple as a servant for more than 6 months, because of this reason, that the servants for 6 months would be constantly associating with him. And they would see him taking a bath, and they would see him taking a massage, they would see him sleeping, they would see him eating. And in that 6 month, they would, so it said that the root of the offenses of a disciple to the guru is when they start becoming familiar with the guru, or when they start considering the guru to be an ordinary person, right? And extended association, it's the breeding ground of these thoughts. So Prabhupada, for the protection of the disciple, would basically, in 6 months' time, when they would basically, at least for 6 months, they would be safe. Then another disciple would come in. So safest association over a long period of time is with peers, hopefully a little bit advanced than you, so that they can inspire you, but not so much of a difference that they're at a completely different level. Right? So like I said, discrimination is important for both. It is important for you, and it is also important for the recipient. If you start treating a Kanishta like an Uttam, his spiritual life will not be very safe. So this is also applicable, Prabhupada says, for those who have material advancement. So they're not devotees, they may have a lot of wealth, they're very rich, they may be in positions of power or influence. We should respect them also. Right? So why? I mean, they may be spiritually Kanishtas. Yes, you should recognize their Kanishtas, but still you should respect them. Prabhupada says, he himself, he would seek out to meet with the heads of states, with leaders of church, etc. And he would talk to them with deference, with a lot of respect. And some of his more neophyte disciples, they would say, "Oh, they are just karmis, and he's just a meat eater," etc. True. But then Prabhupada would look upon them as people that wielded influence in society. If a king becomes a Vaishnav, the whole state becomes Vaishnav. Similarly, if leaders follow a path, then the followers will also path. We should also respect demigods. Bhakti Siddhanta says that one of the faults of Kanishtadhikaris is that they start disrespecting demigods. Right? And if you read the entire Bhagavad Gita, there is no place where it is mentioned that the demigods should be disrespected. Right? When Krishna criticizes, he criticizes not the demigods but the demigod worshippers. Right? He calls them alpamedit, men of limited intelligence, but he's never criticizing the demigods. And why is he criticizing the demigod worshippers? because they're confusing the position of the demigods with his position. He does not criticize those who serve the demigods, understanding them to be servants of Krishna. Right? So essentially, he's not even criticizing demigod worshippers. He's criticizing those who are confused about the position of demigods. And especially amongst followers in ISKCON, once you start following, I was listening to a lecture by Bhakti Sastri Swami, and he was saying that after they get initiation, they think that Indra, Chandra, Surya, they're all like junior devotees, right? They're all like bhaktas, and they're initiated, right? And of course, he was saying in a funny mode, but to some extent, that is harmful. Why? Because the devas are also advanced devotees. That's how they got their position. Right? So if you're disrespecting them, you're committing Vaishnava Apradha. Similarly, parents, elders, and teachers need to be respected. Now, in this particular verse, the focus is on devotee interaction. The others are mentioned just as points of relevance. So it is said that amongst devotees, there are three kinds of seniority: by birth, by initiation, and by realization. Right? So, junior devotees or younger devotees will give respect to older devotees. So they are recognizing the seniority by birth. Then devotees who are initiated earlier are considered senior. Especially in the early days of ISKCON, it was almost like down to a science that if a devotee was initiated a few days after another one, the devotee would consider himself to be a junior devotee, to take it a little bit to the extreme. But yes, by initiation, the seniority is considered. And third, most powerful, is by realization. Like that's why, Prahlad Maharaj, he is 5 years old, but we bow to him, and not only us, but Brahma. Brahma was not actually bowing to him, but he was deferring to him. That I am not able to appease Narsingadev, you go and appease him, right? Recognizing his advancement in realization. Then the reason this verse is given, the reason all this is spoken is for self-awareness. So understanding one's own adhikar helps a devotee in dealing with the others, and essentially it helps them in making spiritual advancement, right? When you understand this, then you realize where you are, where others are, who to take association with, how to serve, who to inquire from, who to be associating in which mood. All this becomes the ingredients of your recipe to make spiritual advancement. So we were talking about grades of devotees, Kanishta, Madhyam, Adhikari, and Uttam Adhikari. We'll speak a little bit more about it. So they are generally considered as neophytes, intermediate, and advanced. Now, when there is gradation, the first question comes, what is the criteria for gradation? On what basis do you say that a person is advanced and another is neophyte? Now, different scriptures, they establish these criteria slightly differently. And while there is some convergence in the underlying way that they are graded, but nevertheless, there is difference in the specific criteria that is applied to distinguish a neophyte from an intermediate. And we will try and look at these various criteria. So in this particular mantra, we see one set of criteria. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he quotes from Nectar of Devotion, which gives a slightly different criteria. He quotes from Srimad Bhagavatam, which gives a slightly different criteria, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, which also gives a slightly different criteria. Right? Then the question becomes that which criteria that you apply, and the answer is all, because as we see, the criteria don't actually contradict one another. They are they're talking about different aspects of advancement, right? It's like you say that this person A is higher than person B in the society. One criteria could be, is he more wealthy? Other could be, does he have more influence? Yet another could be that, is he more respected, right? So different criterias, but there is also a strong correlation in the criterias, right? So that's what actually emerges when we study these criteria from the different scriptures. Now, this nomenclature is also not uniform, right? So nomenclature meaning that we say there are three grades, which is Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttamadhikari. Now the expectation is when you say Uttamadhikari, you're talking about a specific grade of devotees, right? But unfortunately, that is not consistent. What is a Madhyamadhikari in the Bhagavatam is actually an Uttamadhikari in the Nectar of Devotion. Okay? And there is a reason behind why. Once we understand the reason, we can also figure out why this distinction is there. But just to be aware of this. In this verse of Nectar of Instruction, there is no explicit label that is attached. But it does not say that one should mentally offer respect to Kanishtadhikaris. All it says is one should mentally offer respect to those who are chanting. Right? So we derive the labels. The hierarchy is limited, whereas in the NOD and Srimad Bhagavatam, the nomenclature is more specific. It actually says Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttamadhikari. So in Nectar of Devotion, they are called Kanishtadhikari neophytes, Madhyamadhikari as intermediate, and Uttamadhikari as advanced. In Srimad Bhagavatam, they are called Prakrit Bhakta, Madhyamadhikari, and Mahabhagavat. Right? Now there are three gates, so you may assume that there is a correspondence. The Prakrit Bhakta is Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari is Madhyamadhikari, and Mahabhagavat Uttamadhikari, but actually not exactly so, because what the Nectar of Devotion gives is the characteristic of one who is eligible to enter the platform. Right? So when Nectar Devotion says that these are the attributes of one who is Madhyamadhikari, what it means is that these are the attributes of one who is ready to become a Madhyamadhikari. When Srimad Bhagavatam says these are the attributes of Madhyamadhikari, what it means is these are the attributes of one who is practicing Madhyamadhikari. Right? So Srimad Bhagavatam considers them to be already at that stage. The Nectar of Devotion considers them to be ready to enter into that stage. So that's the difference. Right? So again, like in Nectar of Devotion, an Uttamadhikari is now eligible to perform pure devotional service. He is ready to perform pure devotional service, whereas the Mahabhagavat and the Srimad Bhagavatam is already at the platform of pure devotional service. Right? So same nomenclature or similar, like Uttamadhikari, Mahabhagavat, but different connotations there. So the example is that one may have cleared the bar exam and is eligible to practice law. So this is the adhikar as per Nectar Devotion. While the other person may be practicing law. Now both of them are called lawyers, right? So one has cleared the bar exam, right, and he's certified. They ask him, who are you? I'm a lawyer. There's another person who's been practicing law for 50 years. Who are you? I'm a lawyer. So the label may be the same, but there is a huge difference between the two. Right? So that's the difference between Nectar of Devotion and Srimad Bhagavatam. And the reason is that the Nectar of Devotion is for the sadhakas, and the Bhagavatam talks all the way up till Bhava and Prem, pure devotional service. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, at different points, they will actually quote directly from Nectar of Devotion and Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So it talks about both the gradation of devotees from based on Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Sastri Sindhu and Bhagavatam, and then it adds another criteria which is simply based on attraction to chanting of the holy name. Like Mahaprabhu says that who is he is asked who's a devotee, and Mahaprabhu says anyone who has chanted Krishna's name even once should be considered to be a devotee, right? So, but that we understand is based on Mahaprabhu's Mahavadanyaya Bhav, right? He is being overtly compassionate there. So let's talk a little bit of Kanishta Adhikaris. What I've done over here is following Srila Prabhupada's lead in the purport, that I have actually combined the characteristics from this particular verse, NOI, from Nectar of Devotion, from Srimad Bhagavatam. I haven't taken CC per se, because CC is also deriving these, but I've taken these three primarily, NOI, NOD and Srimad Bhagavatam, in coming up with the characteristics. So, Kanishtadhikari is a devotee who is trying to chant the holy name of Krishna, right? He may be Harinam initiated. This is as per text 5, right? One who is trying to chant the holy name of Krishna. Same point made by Mahaprabhu also. In fact, he says, not even trying, even if he chanted just once in his life, right? That is a Kanishta Adhikari. As per Nectar Devotion, this person has Komal Shraddha and Alpagyan. So weak faith. While he has taken to the process, his faith is still weak. He is still figuring things out. And Alpagyan means knowledge is also weak. He has done a little bit of studying here and there, heard a little bit, but is very easily swayed. Because of weak knowledge, somebody comes and says that how can you prove Krishna is God? And the person says, well, Bhagavad Gita Krishna says, and the person says, well, in Shiv Puran it said Shiva is God, in Devi Puran it said Devi is God. So actually all the Purans said, so they are all gods. The person says, okay, yes, makes sense. So because there is weak knowledge, the person is swayed easily. And because there is weak faith, the person can easily fall also. So sometimes when they have unfavorable interactions with other devotees. I remember at a temple there was a person who was coming, and definitely he was showing interest, taken to chanting also, and then he stopped coming. And then I reached out to him and I said, what happened? Initially he said nothing, and then later on I found out the reason. He told me himself that he was standing in the prasadam line, and then he went to the table, and the devotee, and then he asked for some extra helpings, and the devotee who was serving said, move on, there's only one helping per person, I have to serve everybody else. So then the person got very offended by being treated in this way and stopped coming to the temple. Right? So there's not very strong faith. As small things can shake the faith of such a person. According to the Bhagavatam, such a person is faithfully engaged in the worship of the deity in the temple, but does not know how to behave towards devotees or people in general. It's called a Prakrit Bhakta. Right? So such people, they may have faith in the deity. So when it says engage in the worship of the deity, it doesn't mean altar worship, but worshipping in the sense they will come and give obeisances to the deity. Right? But that's the extent. Like in India, you'll see there are people who will travel for long distance. Like if they go to Vrindavan, they will go to Bhakti temple and they will give obeisances there. That's it. Right? While coming out, they will push all the other devotees. They'll step over the head of the other devotees. They will chastise them, and then they will go out and just resume their lives, whatever they were, whether they're taking intoxication, meat eating, etc. So their only focus is, and generally it's not even deities. So they develop faith in a particular deity. So they will say, oh, this, and they will neglect all other deities. And most importantly, they will neglect devotees. Right? So they don't know how to behave towards them. They might condemn them, criticize them, insult them. So these are Prakrit Bhaktas or Kanishta Adhikaris. So these are stages prior to Anartha Nivriti. So in Bhakti, we know everything where Shraddha, Sadhu, Sang, Bhajan, Kriya, Anartha Nivriti. So they are mostly at the stage of Shraddha. They are mostly at the stage of faith. They have some faith, because of which they have developed attachment to the deity. Like it's like Komal Shraddha. They have some attachment to the deities. But because they are still full of anarthas, that is why their behavior is this way. At the lower end, or maybe at the lowest end of Kanishta Adhikaris, are the Prakrit Sahijyas. So the Prakrit Sahijyas are people who chant Hare Krishna, and they basically are, they dance the rasa dance, and they will take intoxicants and say that this is somaras, or they will run after money. So they're still chanting, but their knowledge is completely messed up. Their faith is misguided. They're misguiding other people also. Madhyamadhikari. So these, according to the text we are studying, these are those who have received spiritual initiation, Brahman initiation. Like the Kanishta Adhikaris may have received Harinam initiation, they have received Brahman initiation from the spiritual master, and they are engaged by him in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, which means that they have a strong relationship with their spiritual master, that they are allowing themselves to be guided by the instructions of the Guru. So according to the Nectar of Devotion, they have strong faith. Their knowledge is still weak. So they have strong faith in the process. They have strong faith in the Guru, but knowledge is still weak. So they have enough knowledge that they are convinced themselves, but they don't have enough knowledge that they can defeat others. So they may, if they enter into an argument, they may fail, they may lose that argument. But it does not shake their faith. It's not that they lose an argument and they say, okay, I don't understand Krishna consciousness. They understand that I lost the argument because I have not sufficient knowledge, right? And as for the Bhagavatam, the Madhyamadhikari is a devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the highest object of love, makes friends with the Lord's devotees, is merciful to the ignorant, and avoids those who are envious by nature. Right? So 4 kinds of interactions are given in the Bhagavatam for Madhyamadhikari. One is towards the Lord. So they consider Krishna to be the highest object of love. No question about it. They are fully fixed in that. But whereas the Kanishta did not know how to deal with devotees, the Madhyam knows exactly how to deal with devotees. So they are able to make this distinction between the different grades of devotees. So those who are at the same level as them, the other Madhyamadhikaris, they make friends with them. Those who are at a lower level, those who are Kanishtadhikaris or even lower, they are merciful to them, which means they will preach to them. And those who are envious, the Mayavadis, the atheists, they will upeksha, they will completely avoid them. Right? So this is the main characteristic of the Madhyamadhikari, is that they actually become very strong preachers because they have strong faith and they also have strong bona fide discrimination. Some of the characteristics of Madhyamadhikari is the Dikshakale Bhakta. They receive Brahman initiation, which means that they are worshipping the deities in the temple. For them, Krishna is the only object of love. They are faithful, right? They are fixed in their chanting. Maitri, they make friends with devotees. Kripa, they are merciful on the innocent. Upeksha, they avoid the envious. Weak knowledge, they are themselves convinced but may be defeated by others. Strong faith, so they are fixed in the surrender to the process. That there they will not get swayed. They are typically those who have crossed beyond anartha nivritti. So in the stages of bhakti, they are now at the stage of nishtha. So this characteristic of fixed in chanting, strong faith, that is the stage of nishtha. These are very strong preachers. In fact, it is the madhyam. All the preachers are actually madhyamadhikaris. They are the ones who are actually able to preach. Next, we are the most advanced, which are the uttamadhikari. So, as per Nectar of Instruction, this text, they are advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Right? So, undeviated means that regardless of circumstances, their devotional service does not deviate. So, the cause of deviation in devotional service is anarthas. Right? Now, even the madhyamadhikaris are nivrit of other anarthas, but the uttamadhikaris are even beyond that stage. That regardless of whatever happens, they remain undeviated. And devoid of propensity to criticize others means they're free of false ego. Then, as per the NOD, the uttamadhikari is strong in faith and strong in knowledge. So they are expert in logic, argument, and the revealed scriptures. They can easily hold their own, debate with others, whether within the religion, outside the religion. They can defeat them easily. Their faith is unshakable. Right? So Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotional, he can deliver their whole world. As per the Bhagavatam, they uttamadhikaris see within everything Krishna. Consequently, they see everything in relation to the Lord and understand that everything that exists is eternally situated within the Lord. Right? So, everywhere that they are seeing Krishna. Not just in the deity in the temple, not even just in the devotees, even in the non-devotees, they see Krishna. So, this is one reason why uttamadhikaris are unable to preach. Because they have so much humility in themselves, and because they see Krishna in everyone, they see everybody as more advanced than them. And so when you preach, there is this assumption that I know something, you don't, so let me tell you. But the uttamadhikaris, they're constantly thinking that I know nothing, even though they are expert in the Vedas. And when they look at the other person, even if the person is a rascal, they see Krishna in that person. And they say, oh, this Krishna in him. So all my respects to you. Right? So the only way the uttamadhikaris preach is they come down to the level of the madhyamadhikari and then they preach. So uttamadhikaris are very, very special. Right? So it says, out of many such Vaishnavas, one may be found to be seriously engaged in the service of the Lord, strictly following all the regulative principles, chanting the prescribed number of rounds and japa beads, and always thinking of how to expand Krishna consciousness movement. Such a Vaishnava should be accepted as an uttamadhikari, a highly advanced devotee, and his association should always be sought. Right? So Prabhupada is essentially talking about uttamadhikaris who have come to the platform of madhyamadhikari to preach. Right? So in themselves, the uttamadhikaris, they follow all the regulative principles very, very strictly. The difference is that they follow it strictly not because they have to, but because they want to. So, like the Kanishta or the Madhyamadhikaris, they will follow the regulative principles also strictly, but because they have to. They understand that it is important for them to do. But by the time a person is at the stage of Uttamadhikari, they are so exalted that they don't need to follow any of the regulative principles. They don't need to chant 16 rounds because they are chanting 24/7. But they will still chant 16 rounds because they are very much attached to it. My Guru Maharaj told me, like, this is what I need to do. And Prabhupada says that they are always thinking how to expand Krishna consciousness movement. So this is their mood of mercy, that how can I help others? The mood of service. Very difficult to recognize such an advanced devotee because the progress is internal. Right? As a person becomes more and more advanced, the more and more they internalize their advancement. Right? Two people may be sitting and chanting next to one another. One may be an Uttamadhikari and he's chanting and he's actually seeing Krishna. And the other person is simply chanting. But externally, you will not see much difference. Right? So, just like a chaste wife will not share her intimate moments with her husband with the public, the Uttamadhikari by this time is experiencing intimate interactions with Krishna and his devotees. But they're guarding it. They're guarding it out of shyness. They're guarding it in order to not bewilder persons. And Prabhupada, sometimes when he would stand in front of the deities, he would cry, but he would hide it also. Very few disciples saw him cry. But even when they saw him cry, as soon as he would gain external consciousness, he would immediately move on. Right? Sometimes devotees would see his other symptoms of exalted devotion, and then he would control it. Sometimes he would be giving a class, and one of the stages of advanced bhakti is tam. Tam means becoming almost like senseless. Like he would just stop, and then with great effort he would again he would gather his senses and go ahead. So they try very hard to hide their advancements. Right? Vaishnav mudra ki bujai. The external activities of the Vaishnavas are difficult to understand. Like Maharaj Rishabdev used to be lying on the streets in his own stool and urine. People would throw stones at him, but he was a Mahabhagwat. Right? And the reason it was that he was completely absorbed in the chanting of the holy name. Prabhupada said they can be recognized when they speak. Prabhupada famously once said that a fool is recognized when he speaks. Until the time he's quiet, you don't know the person is a fool. As soon as he opens the mouth and starts talking nonsense, you know it's a fool. Same thing with Uttamadhikaris. That when they start speaking, they will speak pure Krishna consciousness. Right? And most importantly, they speak to the soul. Because that's what they're seeing in the person in front. So many people had this experience with Prabhupada, that when Prabhupada would speak to them, they would feel that Prabhupada is going past all their coverings and speaking directly to their soul. Not even speaking. I was hearing one of Prabhupada's disciples was saying that how when he was in Boston, he was a college student over there, and somebody said there is the sannyasi, so he went over there, and he was an impersonalist at the time, and Prabhupada was giving a class, and he was criticizing the impersonalist. He took a pause, and then he looked at this particular person, right? And this devotee says that one of his daily interactions, which is what he was told by some so-called guru, was that you should look into the mirror and say that you are God. Right? That was one of his daily sadhana. Right? And Prabhupada was giving the class, and he was saying many people think they are God. And then he paused, and then he looked at this person. And he said that he felt Prabhupada knew exactly everything that he was thinking and he was doing. And that was it. That was the end of his impersonalist dealings. Came, joined the temple, became a devotee. So they have the Uttamadhikaris, they have powerful influences, right? At least in terms of the quality of the devotees, right? So maybe they're not into. Prabhupada would say, I need a moon, I don't need a million stars, right? So now Prabhupada did initiate a million stars and also moons, but the influence is mostly felt by those who are ready to appreciate their point. So their influence is more in terms of quality than quantity. At a spiritual level, they're considerable at the level of Sakhyaras, which means they know the inner desire of Krishna. They're always engaged in preaching because they're compassionate towards the fallen soul, because that is Krishna's desire. So some other characteristics of Uttamadhikaris, they're free from anarthas, they're pure, they're at a stage of spontaneous bhakti. Right? So they may be ragunag or bhav or prem, but they will go to great lengths to hide it. They are strong in both faith and knowledge. They can defeat opposing views easily and they can never be swayed. Self-realized, because when they are seeing Krishna, they are seeing themselves also without offenses. Why? Because they are free from anarthas. They have no false ego. Constantly engaged in the Lord's service. Right? So one of the characteristics of Uttamadhikari is how do you use your time? Right? And every moment that they have, sometimes when you read the daily schedule of these advanced devotees like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, sleeping for 2-3 hours. Bhaktivinoda Thakur especially, he had a full-time job and very, very regimented. Do the job, come back, take a bath, rest for half an hour, write until 2 a.m. Sleep for 1 hour, eat some bananas, then morning worship for 1 hour. So very, very regimented. And if you look at it, that almost all the time that they have is one way or the other used in the service of the Lord. Even the job that they're doing, they simply see it as a service for the Lord. Completely disinterested in material enjoyment. Strictly follow rules and regulations, not because they need it, but because they actually have an attachment to the rules and regulation. Devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Right? So this verse actually talks that as a characteristic, because criticism is a symptom of false ego and anarthas. Since at this stage they have transcended those stage of false ego and anarthas, they have no propensity to criticize. But even if they criticize, right, so one may say that Srila Prabhupada would criticize, sometimes he would chastise, but even if they criticize without false ego or enmity. So it's not like the regular criticism. It is coming out of pain and regret. Aversion to the disease and not the diseased. So they criticize the action, not the person. That is important as a service to the object. Right? So they actually do it in a mood of service. Prabhupada would often say that to his disciples that I criticize you all, but in the mood of helping you make advancement. So what can I do? That's the service that I have been given by my Guru Maharaj. And you could see he had genuine regret. He didn't want to criticize, and many times he would glorify his disciples to the point they would get embarrassed. But then also he would chastise them, but completely in this mood, that how can I help you make spiritual advancement? And never out of any aversion to the person. They would never say that. Prabhupada would never develop malice towards a person. So many disciples who left Prabhupada, they would come back again. Prabhupada would happily accept them again. You would never have any malice towards them. How dare you leave me? Now you're coming back. Very happy to take them back. The Uttamadhikaris are full of humility. They're unable to preach in their natural position. Right? So if you're unable to criticize, if you're unable to discriminate, how can you preach? Right? So what do? They come down to the platform of Madhyamadhikaris and then they become powerful preachers. They become gurus and acharyas. They become very powerful in spreading Krishna consciousness. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that these are those personalities that convert people to Vaishnavism. So I wanted to summarize the three. So Kanishtadhikari, their faith in the deity only. It's a picture of Banke Bihari temple. Like you'll see thousands, sometimes you'll see hundreds and thousands of people just waiting to get a jhalak, a darshan of the deity. That's it. but they will insult devotees, right? This is Duryodhana asking Vidur to leave, right? So they will insult devotees. They insult everybody, including devotees. They have weak knowledge, right? They get bewildered by the knowledge, and they have weak faith, right? So little bit here and there, their faith wavers. They may have received Harinam Diksha there, and they chant the holy name. Right? That's why they are called devotees. They have received Diksha, they are chanting the holy name. Madhyamadikari, they have received Brahman Diksha. Right? So they are chanting the Gayatri Mantra, worship the deities, not just at home, but also in the temple. They are merciful to the ignorant. These are the preachers. They go out. So this is preaching in the prison. Right? So they reach out to even those who are most separated from spirituality and try to touch their heart. They avoid the envious. Okay, this is a play, but this is showing just Sahajya Bhav. They will make friends with devotees. That's the main thing. Madhyamadikaris, that they're always in the association of devotees. Knowledge is still weak. Stronger, but still weak, but their faith in Krishna is strong. Right? So these are our Madhyamadikaris. Uttamadikaris, they see the Lord everywhere. Brahmanagavi Hastini. Right? They are the ones who are actually seeing the Lord in one way or the other. They are devoid of the propensity to criticize. When Haridas Thakur was beaten in 22 marketplaces by the soldiers, then he was still protective about them. He had no malice towards them. Right? They understood who Haridas Thakur was, and they were reluctant to beat him, but that's the order they had gotten. Right? And so they were saying, "We're sorry, we have to beat you." And Haridas Thakur said, "Don't worry, I'm praying for you. Nothing will happen to you." Can you imagine that mood? The person who's beating you, you're praying for that person. So that's the mood of the Uttamadikari. They're experiencing Krishna at all times. Right? So most of us will experience Krishna sometime, maybe in front of the deity, maybe when chanting, maybe reading. But the Uttamadikari is 24/7. Undeviated devotional service. And this is Haridas Thakur being lured by the prostitute. Right? Haridas Thakur says, "Sit, let me finish my rounds." So regardless of what the allurement is, they don't deviate from their devotional service. Very strong knowledge. Right? So they can become teachers, they can become preachers, they can convert people if they want, and very strong faith. So these are Uttamadikari. So then Prabhupada talks in the purport about becoming and advancing to these levels. How do you become a Kanishta Adhikari? And he talks about it in the context of ISKCON. That how is ISKCON giving people an opportunity to become an advanced. So he says that the Krishna consciousness movement, a chance is given to everyone without discrimination of caste, creed or color. Everyone is invited to join in this movement, sit with us, take prasad and hear about Krishna. Right? Prabhupada gives the example of George Harrison or the Beatles. He doesn't give the name, but he gives an example. There's a famous musician and he's chanting and he has pictures of Krishna in his house. And he says, so I consider him to be a devotee. Right? So he's one of those. Now he's not a practicing devotee, but he was occasionally chanting and he was favorable to other devotees. Now factually speaking, in our movement, almost all are Kanishta Adhikaris. Sometimes we tend to use the term derogatorily, right? We'll say, oh, you're such a Kanishta. But actually, Kanishta is also it is a wide platform. It goes all the way to Anartha Nivriti, right? So, how many practicing devotees are Anartha Nivrit? Very, very few. And they are Kanishtas still there, right? So, it goes to a very advanced platform. And even though we may want to think otherwise, but with the exception of gurus and initiating spiritual masters, most of the practicing devotees there are different spectrums in the Kanishta. So in the scripture it said the Kanishta Adhikari stage are itself divided into the three stages, Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttam. So there is a Kanishta Kanishta, Kanishta Madhyam and Kanishta Uttam. So there may be somebody, there are some who are Kanishta Kanishta and there are some who are Kanishta Uttam. Right? But they are all still in that broad category of Kanishta because they are still anarthas. That are there. Being anartha nivritta is very, very rare. So devotees at the level of Madhyam are very rare. And at the level of Uttamadhikari, they are very, very, very rare. Personalities like Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, very, very rare. And when they come, then they change the world. Right? So that's how rare they are. So becoming a Madhyamadhikari. So Prabhupada says, and this is again the context of ISKCON, he says, when we see that someone is actually interested in Krishna consciousness and wants to be initiated, we accept him as a disciple for the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. When a neophyte devotee is actually initiated and engaged in devotional service by the orders of the spiritual master, he should be accepted immediately as a bona fide Vaishnava and obeisance should be offered unto him. Right? So here Prabhupada is talking about those who have been initiated. Prabhupada doesn't make the distinction between first and second year, doesn't make the distinction, but contextually we can understand these are Brahman initiated devotees. And Prabhupada's instruction is that you should accept them as a bona fide Vaishnava and offer obeisances. Because for Kanishtadhikaris, the instruction is mentally respect them. But for Madhyamadhikari, you should mentally accept them and physically offer obeisances to them. Right? So that's how we understand Prabhupada is talking about Madhyamadhikari. So one becomes a Madhyamadhikari by taking Diksha. So Diksha, Di means transcendental knowledge and Kshayate means destroys sins. So that is what happens at the time of Diksha, that one is given transcendental knowledge and the sins are destroyed. But it is the beginning of this process. That's important, right? So Diksha does not mean that when the spiritual master gives you a name, that your name is Bhaktadas now, that now all of a sudden all the Vedas have manifested in your mind and all your sins have been eradicated. That it doesn't mean that. It means it is the beginning of the process of your sins being destroyed, and it is the beginning of the process of knowledge being given to you. Right? Now, factually speaking, just getting Diksha does not mean anything. It is just a formalizing of a ceremony. Right? For instance, Prabhupada gives the example of a husband and a wife, that when they have the marriage ceremony, it doesn't really mean much. What actually means is when the husband and the wife start living together in the mood of a husband and a wife. Like for instance, they do the ceremony and the man goes his own way, the woman goes his own way, then they're husband and wife in name only. Right? On the other hand, even if they do not go through that ceremony but they live together as in the mood of being a husband and wife, they are husband and wife. So similarly, Diksha, it's a samskar. Samskar means it creates an impression in the mind. So that's why these samskars are done, they formalize things. And so at the time of Diksha, this relationship is formalized there. But if one is not following through, then the relationship disappears. So because Diksha is the beginning of the process, one should understand it is the beginning of the eradication of karma. Right? So this more philosophical point is made that the reason that we have our body is because we have prarabdha karma. Now if at the time of initiation all our karmas are destroyed, we should drop dead at the time. Because the body is a symptom of karma. If karma is destroyed, the body is also destroyed. But that does not happen. What does it mean? We still have karma. But the process of the eradication of karma has now begun, both pious and impious karma. Most importantly is that the karma moves from Durga Devi to Krishna. So that way when somebody says your karma is eradicated, they are not completely incorrect. So the karma that was under the supervision of Yamraj, of Durga Devi, that is eradicated. But it now becomes Krishna karma. So that karma is now with Krishna. He can do whatever he wants with it. He can continue to give it to us in the same way that Lord Yamaraj would give it to us. He can actually amplify the effect also. Like sometimes devotees actually suffer more. And he can reduce the effect also. But whatever Krishna does, he does with only one purpose, which is to accelerate our return back to him. When Yamaraj has karma, when Durga Devi is supervising karma, they are simply superintendents who are of a legal system. This thing good you did, this thing good you will happen, bad you did, bad will happen, right? They're simply going through it mechanically. When Krishna gets that karma, now he's like a father and treating a son. Oh, you were naughty over here? Okay, let me give you one small push instead of a big one. You were good over here, let me reward you. Or you might say, okay, this naughtiness is not going to help you, let me give you a big push over here so that you can come back to me. So now it becomes Krishna karma. Same point is made in Brahma Samhita. Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhajan. That when the person is doing bhakti, karmani nirdhati kintu, that Krishna is then in control of the karma. Now, the spiritual master is also absorbing the karma of the disciples. Part of a mystical thing. Now, he does not take all the karma, but he gets some reactions. When Prabhupada was once very sick, then he said that I'm sick not because of my karma, not because of Krishna, but because of all the nonsense my disciples are doing. Another time he said, don't make me come back. One way of saying that if you don't go back to Godhead, I have to come back again and again to help you in this journey, right? But Krishna gives a lot of protection to the Guru. Once a person asked Prabhupada that you initiated so many people, many of the people just left you, right? Prabhupada initiated how many? Maybe about a little over 8,000 people, and how many remained? Less than, less than 100. They're in hundreds, not 100, but they're in hundreds. So over time, the majority of the disciples have left. And this was happening even when Prabhupada was there. There were people who would take initiation just because they thought it was cool, and then they just left and they continued with the intoxication, etc. So a person asked Prabhupada that you say that the Guru takes the disciple of the karma of the disciples are committing the sinful activities. And then Prabhupada said, they're never my disciple. And he said, but you gave them initiation. And Prabhupada said, yes, but they were never my disciples. Which means that the Guru-disciple relationship is actually established by this interaction of tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Right? This whole interaction of spiritual inquiry, service, following the instructions of the Guru. That's what makes the Guru-disciple relationship happen. Not just the formality of Diksha. As Prabhupada said, they were never my disciples, they are doing whatever they have to do. I have nothing to do with them. Because they never followed through with this mode of a Guru-disciple relationship. So, in the general understanding, there are two paths of progress, the Pancharatrika marg and the Bhagavad marg. Right? The Pancharatrika marg is subject to rules and regulations. Like we follow mostly Pancharatrika marg, Sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti. Vidhis we follow. Do this, don't do this. There is the Bhagavad marg where there is not so much focus on rules and regulation but spontaneous devotion. Right? People who are bhajananandis, who are basically simply happy in chanting the holy name. Now, even for practicing devotees, the understanding is that they will at some point mature to Bhagavad marg. Initially, there is a focus on Pancharatrika marg because they don't have a lot of spontaneous attachment to Krishna. So what do? They follow the rules and regulations, and the process purifies them, and then they develop this spontaneous love for Krishna. Factually speaking, in Gaudiya Vaishnava, in ISKCON, the two traditions has been blended, and the reason I'm talking about it is because this also reflects in Diksha, in the initiations. Right, so before Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, there was only one initiation, right? But then he made two initiations because giving one initiation was risky. So the first is the Harinam initiation, and that is initiating in the Pancharatrik mark. Right? So the focus here is to practice chanting, follow the regulative principles. The second is Bhagavad Diksha. Now this is still Pancharatrik, but Bhagavad mark is now introduced as glimpses. So glimpses meaning that you get an opportunity to worship the deities on the altar, more spontaneity over there, and you get to chant more mystical mantras. So you get develop attachment for that mantra. Right? So Harinam is mostly Pancharatrik. Brahman Diksha is Pancharatrik, but with glimpses of the Bhagavad Marga. So at the time of Harinam Diksha, three things happen. One is that the person is given a tilak, right? And Prabhupada was very insistent the disciple will always wear a tilak because this is known as an urdhva pundra. So urdhva means going upwards. And so wearing a tilak means that I accept the path upwards. I surrender to spiritual life and give up my material attachments. And this is common to all Vaishnava Sampradayas. Right? The tilaks may be slightly different. Right? Like Shri Sampradaya, they have a red line. But tilak is marking your body, saying that my body is now a temple of Krishna. Right? It's identifying your body in relationship to the Lord. The Shaivites, of course, they have a horizontal tilak. Vaishnavas have vertical tilaks. So first thing is the tilak. Prabhupada would say that if you cannot wear a tilak with Gopi Chandan, then wear a water tilak. Right? At least that understanding is there. Second is the disciple accepts the Kanthi Mala. Right? The Kanthi Mala, reading a book by Bhakti Sastri, and he says it's a dog collar. So just like when you have a dog, you put a collar and then the owner has the leash by which he controls the dog. So similarly, Kanthi Mala is the disciple telling the guru that now I am under your control. Right? So control means I have promised to follow your instructions. Right? So the disciple is saying I am now bound by the instructions of the guru. Also, the Kanthi Mala at the time of initiation, people can wear it before also, but at the time of initiation, they start putting 3 rounds of the Kanthi Mala and different understandings. One is that you transcend the 3 varnas. So you become a Brahman. You transcend the Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, you become Brahman. Bhakti Siddhanta would make this point that initiated Brahmans are much superior to seminal Brahmans. So those were Brahmans who are just born because the parents are Brahmans, right? He said those who are initiated into Brahma as Brahmans, they are much more superior. Also, the 3 rounds mean that the devotee is signaling that is trying to surpass the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, ignorance, and transcend to Shuddha Sattva. Also, the 3 rounds mean that with body, mind, and words, the devotee promised to serve the Lord and the spiritual master. Then the third thing that happens during Harinam Diksha is Harinam. That's what it gets the name Harinam Diksha. That means the devotee gets a spiritual name, Harinam. Like he gets a spiritual name of Hari or his devotee. Right? So they can identify themselves that I am Harinam Das, that I am the servant, or Dasi, I am the servant. Also receive the Mahamantra. Nowadays, the Mahamantra is given anyway, but more formalized, that now I promise to chant 16 rounds every day. So just as I mentioned, the above 3 are Pancharatrika Marg. Now technically speaking, they are not needed, right? Because if one is so advanced that all this is coming naturally, then what is the need for it to be prescribed? Right? So from a pure technical perspective, it's not needed. From a practical perspective, it is very much needed. Because very few of us are so advanced that we can simply go to the mature state. We need this rules and regulations and framework that is created through the Pancharatric Marg to make advancement. Then the second is the Brahman Diksha, second initiation. Prabhupada says once a devotee has been observed to be steady in following the rules, he is given Brahman initiation. So when one receives the second initiation of Brahman initiation, two things are happen. One, he gets the Gayatri mantra, right? In the previous one, he got the Hare Krishna Maha mantra. So the Gayatri mantra, or rather he gets a set of Gayatri mantras. So he gets the Brahma Gayatri, Guru Gayatri, Gauranga Gayatri, Krishna Gayatri. So he gets a set of Gayatri mantras that are not given to the first initiates. So it's a secret mantra. So you very rarely see these mantras written anywhere. And Prabhupada was critical of people who would put the Gayatri mantra on the recording, etc. Prabhupada himself doesn't write the Gayatri mantra. In all his books, he's not seen it. But in India, of course, there are people who are selling juice and they have the Gayatri mantra playing. But they're just then sound bites, right? Because the Gayatri mantra is full of very deep spiritual realizations. And Ija, the second thing is Ija. So Ija means that worship of the deities. Right? So whether it is at home or the temple, and this is where the potential of Bhagavad Gita comes in. Right? When you're actually touching the Supreme Lord, when you're actually massaging the lotus feet of the Lord, dressing Him, then one begins to also experience the more spontaneous aspects of devotion. So Prabhupada said these 5 things assure one to make success. So the 3 things in Harinam and the 2 things in Brahman. Wearing a tilak, wearing a kantimala, and getting a spiritual name, and chanting the Gayatri mantra, worshipping the deity. All this in the context of developing faith in the instructions of the spiritual master. Right? So that is a strong recipe for success. Prabhupada talks a little bit about the requirements for Diksha, material detachment, inquisitiveness, Divyam Jnanam, and Tad Vigyartham. Right? So, Divyam Jnanam means inquisitiveness about spirituality, and Tad Vigyartham. So, from a practical perspective, so these two are very important. Many people make very abstract inquiries. I've seen personally that generally when people begin to make very, very abstract inquiries into the scriptures, it's a clear sign that they have no desire to make progress. They'll say that if in the spiritual world this is happening, why is it not happening in the material world? And Krishna is always 16, then how can others be at different ages? So they'll make very, very abstract, foolish inquiries. So real inquiry is Divya Jnanam is Tad Vigyartham. What does Vigyartham means? Vigyan. Vigyan means the Gyan that you get, you actually act upon it. That is Vigyan. So when a person is sincerely inquiring, they are inquiring from the context of their own practices. That how can I put this into practice in my own life? That is the primary characteristic of genuine inquiry. Tad Vigyartham. Then prepared to practice celibacy, austerity, and control of the body and mind. Tapasa, brahmacharyana, samenacha, damenacha. Because these are the prerequisites to spiritual life. If you're not able to control your mind, then very difficult to make spiritual advancements. So it's not that the person controls the mind, but he's prepared to practice controlling the mind. Prepared to practice austerity. And so that's important. It's not that one immediately becomes celibate and austere and controls the mind, but there is the willingness to practice it, and through practice later on perfection comes. Then formally approaches the spiritual master. Tasmad Gurum Prapadyate Jagyasu Shreha Uttamam. right? So it is said that for first initiation, the disciple should approach the spiritual master. For the second initiation, the disciple should wait for the spiritual master to indicate, right? So you'll see that when when devotees they approach or devotees when they take shelter informally of the guru will wait for the disciple to approach them, right? Bona fide gurus. There are other gurus who try to cultivate disciples, right? They will say, "You become my disciple. You become my disciple." That's not the process, because the person may not be ready. But the focus here is that tasmad guru prapadyate, that the person should be ready to surrender to the guru, jigyasu shreya, interested in transcendental knowledge. So the process of diksha is said to be the beginning of bhajana kriya. At that point, one is now factually performing devotional service because they're connected to Krishna. Some people say, I'm chanting, but I'm not initiated. Am I making progress? Yes. But initiation will accelerate the process, because along with chanting, then all these other aspects are also built into initiation. The divyam jnanam, the tadvigyartham, the gurum prapadyate. So these are all very powerful catalysts that makes one make advancement. If one is chanting, yes, the holy name is working, the person is making advancement, but the advancement will not be that rapid. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said, at the time of initiation, when a devotee fully surrenders to the service of the Lord, Krishna accepts him to be as good as he himself. So this is the descending mercy. That when a person is initiated, he connects himself to a guru in a bona fide parampara, which is going all the way back to Krishna. Prabhupada would give the example that you take a lamp and you plug it into a power socket and the lamp glows. So even the power socket itself is small, but behind the socket are the wires, and the wires runs hundreds of miles. And where do they finally go? They go to some huge generator that is generating all the power. But for that to happen, the plug should be connected to the generator, and you should be plugged into the plug, right? So then the power now from the source starts coming down. So that is why when Krishna says he accepts him as good as himself, he is now fully bestowing his mercy on that person. Srila Prabhupada gives many empirical examples of students. He's talking mostly about material detachment. Like example of Giriraj Maharaj. When Giriraj Maharaj became a disciple, his father was a prominent attorney in Chicago, and his father came. This was initial days of ISKCON. ISKCON had almost no money at the time, and his father came, and he was a lawyer, so he was used to dealing in that way. So he made out a check to Prabhupada, and he said, "You fill in any amount that you want, and leave my son." Right? And he said, "Fill out any amount, 1 million, 2 million," and this is during the 60s. When a million was a lot of money, and Prabhupada returned him the check, and he says that Prabhupada said, Krishna, how can you? Krishna is the richest. What can you give Krishna? Amrish Prabhu is one of the descendants of Ford and co-owner of the Ford company. So he's very, very rich, multi-millionaire person, and he's actually the force behind the current building of the Mayapur temple. Right? So developed this attachment. I was listening to once Amrish Prabhu had come to our temple and he was speaking, and he was saying that after he took initiation, because he was a part owner of the company, contractually he was required to attend the annual board meeting of Ford Motors. And he said just that one meeting in the year, he said he would be the whole year he would be worrying about it. I have to go to that meeting. Because everybody would be talking about share prices, corporate strategy, etc. He had no interest in it. All he wanted was to serve Prabhupada. then how to accept a guru? Very briefly, Prabhupada talks about it. Those is that, when disciples are looking for a guru, one thing is that they should know enough to understand that this is a bona fide guru. Right? So the burden is on them, that they should know enough. Like people say that there are so many gurus, how do I know which is a bona fide guru? The burden is on you. You have to read, you have to associate, you have to find out, you have to understand enough to distinguish between one who is bona fide and not. It's not that all the bona fide gurus are in ISKCON only, right? There are bona fide gurus everywhere. Yeah, and there are also many cheater gurus also. But you have to make that discrimination yourself. How do you do that? That jigyasu shreha uttamam. That you have to inquire about the spiritual life. What are the qualities of a guru? What should I look for it? How do I understand that this guru is bona fide and not? Then the second two are very important in taking Diksha. Once you identify such a person, there may be more than one gurus. If you're fortunate, you may be in a situation there may be more than one bona fide guru. But there is one person that inspires you to follow his instructions. And you should have faith that that person will deliver you. These two things need to go hand in hand. That you should be ready to follow his instructions, and you should have faith that the guru will deliver you. Prabhupada would say that taking initiation is like marrying. So there are many girls, but for a boy there is one girl. There is a girl that meets, that inspires him, right? That inspires him, in this case, with love and whatever other emotions that are there, and that's the girl for him, right? And after he's married that girl, no other girl exists. It's the same thing that when a disciple takes shelter of the guru, that's the only guru for him. At that point, he should not think that this guru gives better classes, this guru is more charismatic, this guru sings better kirtan, etc. That's just like being unfaithful in marriage. So maybe that may be true, but the fact that you have taken shelter of a guru, which means that you have signaled that you are now ready to follow the instructions of the guru. You have signaled that you have faith that the guru will deliver you. That's the only guru for you. Of course, it doesn't mean that upeksha, doesn't mean that you start rejecting all the gurus, but they become your shiksha gurus. Right? They become the source of instructions for you. But the Diksha Guru, there is only one and one Diksha Guru. You can have multiple Siksha Gurus, but Diksha Guru is only one. The one the Guru has exclusively taken responsibility of delivering you. The Shiksha Gurus don't have that responsibility. They may be favorable to it, but they don't have that responsibility. But the Diksha Guru takes that responsibility. Right? What are the don'ts? Don't make a fashion show of spiritual life. Right? Many people say, "Oh, I have a guru," and it just become like I do yoga. I have a guru, so it's just like a fashion statement. And do not inquire about mundane matters. Right? The guru is not there to help you in your financial investments or to arrange marriages for you. The only purpose of the guru is to help you make spiritual advancements. Right? And do not make inquiries just for the sake of knowledge gathering. Right? So it goes to the same point we were discussing, that tad vigyartham. So one should only inquire on what one wants to practice, not just abstract inquiries. The Prabhupada once said, inquiry, but no progress. So disciples would come and just to show whatever, they would ask all these far out questions. Right? Sometimes Prabhupada would answer, and then Prabhupada would sometimes say, what's the point? Is this going to help you chant better? To know specific details about how many columns were there in Krishna's palace in Dwarka? How's that going to help you? But if it helps you, yes, then you should inquire. But otherwise, only inquire about those things that help you make progress. So Prabhupada says the Krishna consciousness movement prescribes 16 rounds daily because people in the Western countries cannot concentrate for long periods while chanting on beats. So here Prabhupada is talking about the position of an acharya in establishing rules and regulations and modifying rules and regulations. Only the Guru and specifically the Acharyas can do it. So, Prabhupada's Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would prescribe 64 rounds to his disciples, especially those who were living in the ashram. Right? And when Prabhupada first took his first batch of devotees, disciples, he said 64 rounds. Right? And they said, we can't chant 64 rounds. Because 64 rounds take, 16 rounds take 2 hours, 64 rounds take 8 hours. So we can't do it. So Prabhupada understood that. And because he was in the position of an acharya, he was able to modify it. Right? So he said, okay, you do 16 rounds, but not less than 16 rounds. Now, one should not say that, well, Prabhupada changed 64 to 16, so maybe I can change 16 to 8. Like, we can't do that. And it has to be done by one who is empowered to do that. Prabhupada says one should not become a spiritual master unless he attains the platform of Uttama Adhikari. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur talks about how Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava can be recognized by the ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. Now, a Kanishta Adhikari or a Madhyam Adhikari, they can also become gurus. The only thing that happens is that the disciples will not advance beyond their guru's platform. So if a Kanishta Adhikari becomes a guru, his disciples will at the most become Kanishta Adhikaris. Or if a Madhyam Adhikari becomes a guru, the disciples will at the most become Madhyam Adhikaris. Right? So if the person is interested in becoming an Uttama Adhikari, then the recommendation is to take shelter of one who is also an Uttama Adhikari. Right? So therefore a disciple should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari as a spiritual master. So rising to Uttama Adhikari, Prabhupada says that everyone begins a devotional life from neophyte stage. Right? So it's not that one is born as an Uttama Adhikari, but everybody starts as a Kanishta Adhikari. And initially, they follow the Pancharatric mark carefully. They finish the chanting the prescribed number of rounds. They worship the deities, serve the Guru and devotees. And then, step by step, they reach the highest platform of Uttamadhikari. Right? So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said that one whose faith is soft and pliable is called a neophyte, but gradually by following the process, he will rise to the platform of a first class devotee. So this is Prabhupada encouraging us. So we should not plan to stay Kanishtadhikaris forever. Right? The reason that we have become Kanishtadhikari is so that we can become Uttam Adhikari. And the process is simple. Right? It's not a mystical process that you fast for 24 days, sit under a tree and lightning strikes, or suddenly you get a bodh gyan. There's no room for all these theatrics in Vaishnava theology. It's very systematic and balanced. So you're Kanishta Adhikari, you follow the process. You chant your rounds, serve the deities, serve the devotees, become Madhyam. Continue doing that, become an Uttama Adhikari. And this, Prabhupada says, is the potency of chanting. The chanting of the holy names of Krishna is so sublime that if one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra offenselessly, carefully avoiding the 10 offenses, he can be gradually elevated to the point of understanding there is no difference between the holy name of the Lord and the Lord himself. Right? So the primary fuel to the engine of progressing from Kanishta to Uttamadhikari is the chanting of the holy name. And the chanting of the holy name is the process that gets purified and purifies us. One who has reached such an understanding should be very much respected by the neophyte devotees. One should know for certain that without chanting the holy name of the Lord offenselessly, one cannot be a proper candidate for advancement and Krishna consciousness. Right? So the instruction is given to serve the Uttamadhikari with faith, associate with him in the mood of service, and inquire. Like if you're fortunate to have an Uttamadhikari, then this is how Prabhupada says we should associate with the Uttamadhikari. So what is the conclusion? That in this verse, Sri Rupa Goswami advises the devotee to be intelligent enough to distinguish between the grades of devotee, the Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttamadhikari. The devotee should know the position of others to be able to properly deal with them accordingly, right? In a way that they don't offend, he doesn't offend them, and also in the way that he can take shelter of them, right? So if he recognizes an Uttamadhikari, he takes shelter of it. He doesn't want to take, should not take shelter of a Kanishtadhikari, right? So both the things happen. The devotee should also know his own position to make advancements from that level. Like if somebody is thinking, I'm already an Uttamadhikari and there's no need for me to make progress, spiritual life is finished at that point. So they should know factually what position I am, what position the others are, and then relate accordingly. Also, should not try to imitate the devotee situated at a higher platform. Right? So understanding these differences will protect the will protect the activities. Like sometimes when disciples are fortunate that the spiritual master comes and lives with them, the spiritual master is at the platform of Uttamadhikar, right? They will go up, they will get up early in the morning, they will chant, they will preach. So they go whole day fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, right? And the disciple who may be a Kanishtadhikari, he's observing the Guru and he says, I'll be like that. And the Guru goes back after some time, and a few days the disciple gets up early in the morning and starts following the same regimen, but they can't sustain themselves, right? Because it's not external, but the internal spiritual Shakti that is fueling all that. So this is one of the wonderful verses in the Nectar of Instruction. I'm sorry I took a little bit more time, but Prabhupada has put so much in the purports. I wanted to make sure that we all get the benefit of all the nectar that Srila Prabhupada has put in the purport. So we'll end over here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thakur Premanand.